Hello, I'm Sam Hawkins, and today we're going to be going over a movement called Transcendentalism, which was a movement that started in the late 1820s in America. People that followed Transcendentalism at this time not only thought that you could acquire knowledge through your senses and intuition, but also through reviewing and contemplating your spirit and your inner mind. It really pushed for giving people and citizens an outlet to break free from traditions and norms of society that they've been following for basically their whole lives, and really diving into their own beliefs and finding out what their own values and morals are. Transcendentalism also really strongly suggests that you should grow closer to nature and that you'll become more intellectual if you do so, and that your spirit will go stronger and you can really find out what your morals are and what you believe in. And the norms of society won't project themselves on you in nature as much. If you go into nature, then you can leave behind the worries of societies and cultural norms and any monetary value of anything, and you can truly find out what you believe in if you go into nature, and you can grow closer to God, is what they believed in also. Transcendentalists did believe that the government and institutions were corrupt, but they also believed that the individual person was good. So they believe that deep down, if people really go into their souls and their spiritual beliefs and their moral values, that they'll come out a good person. They just have to invest the time in it. But they did believe that the government should be working for the people, not the people for the government. So if the government was doing something bad, so at this time, a good example was slavery. So they believed that if the government was doing something bad, like endorsing slavery, then the citizens should do something about it and voice their opinions. They shouldn't just follow the government like the government was some higher power or anything, because the government is people too. They mess up and they can be corrupt, but the people and the citizens can change that. Transcendentalism was really similar to the American Romantic movement, which happened before Transcendentalism, but they were different in a few ways. They both really valued nature and going into nature to reflect, but the Romantics, they valued creativity and self-expression more, and then Transcendentalist authors, they valued intellect and growing morally and growing as a person more. One of the poets during the time of the Transcendentalist movement was named Walt Whitman. He was not only a poet, but he was a journalist, and he wrote essays and a lot of different genres. He didn't use like iambic pentameter and more structured poems. He didn't use that. He used free verse, or some people um, call it free form, I think, um, which didn't really have that many fixed meters or a rhyme scheme, but he did use, like, Whitman used lines in different lengths, and he really thought outside of the box, because a lot of poets at that time or before that, they didn't write in that style. They used fixed and structured poems, and he was not really conforming to that. Walt Whitman wrote about a few controversial topics for his time, and this was like he wrote about democracy and war at the time, as well as slavery, which was a really big topic at the time, and patriotism. Some of the other topics that he wrote about that were kind of off the beaten path that not that many people were talking about, and some people kind of thought it was weird, were the cycles of life and finding your individual self and self growth. More the cycles of life, just because the Christian lifestyle was so big at that time, and before that, and America was founded on really religious principles, and movements before that really stressed on religion and structure in religion, but he was kind of talking about different things. One really good example that Walt Whitman was talking about the cycles of life in his poems or essays is in A Song of Myself, which is a poem that he wrote. And in it, he asked the question, "What is the grass?" which I believe is a metaphor for the cycles of life. So the grass is basically, we eat it, and then we will die and we'll go into the ground, and then the ground rises up and it creates the grass, which again, we eat, and then it goes on, which is the cycle of life, which presents death, which is something that we expect in our lifetime, obviously. So that's really a good example that he poses the cycle of life topic. And diving deeper into that poem, The Song of Myself, a lot of people would think by the title especially that it is egocentric or vain, but that's not the case at all. I think that Whitman was trying to imagine that whenever the reader is reading the poem, he's thinking or she's thinking that myself is their self. And we're all intertwined in that way. So whenever they're celebrating their life and celebrating their knowledge, they're celebrating their selves, not necessarily Whitman, but he wanted to be individualistic. And in that poem, he wants you to celebrate yourself and your knowledge, but also be open to growth and to intellectual growth and spiritual growth, and not just be set in your ways. The poem A Song to Myself also is about how we're interconnected. So myself, like we discussed before, is referring to the individual reading it, but also it signifies that we are all connected. So yourself is myself and myself is myself, if that makes sense. So it really brings everyone together, and it also touches on you being close to God and nature, which also brings you together as well. Another poem that Walt Whitman wrote was called Pioneers, O Pioneers, which really envisioned the adventurous nature of the youth and also manifests destiny to the West all the way to California for America. I'm going to read a few lines from the poem. So it starts with, "Come, my tan-faced children, follow well in order, get your weapons ready. Have you your pistols? Have you your sharp-edged axes? Pioneers, O pioneers. For we cannot tarry here. We must march, my darlings. We must bear the brunt of danger. We, the youthful, sinewy races. All in the rest of us depend. Pioneers, O pioneers." So this really also it relates to Transcendentalism because it really wants the youth, especially, to be independent and self-dependent, and that's another really big characteristic in Transcendentalism, because if you are self-reliant, then you don't have to depend on society or anything or anyone, so you don't have to please society by your beliefs. So you can have your own beliefs, you can rely on yourself and be independent and have your own values, so that society's values don't impact that. So basically, in conclusion, Walt Whitman was a very influential author and poet at this time in the Transcendentalism movement. He wrote about a lot of topics that were very transcendentalist. So nature, how nature can bring out your intellect and bring out what you truly believe in and your morals and values, as well as rebellious spirit and your self reliance, which was another really big characteristic of Transcendentalism, and getting closer to God and nature and how everyone is connected, but also you should celebrate your individualism. So I hope you learned some about Walt Whitman and Transcendentalism in general, and have a good morning, day, or night whenever you're watching this. Thanks.